In this episode of Motive Garage presented by Sparesbox, we compete in the Turbosmart Flying 500 and we push our R32 GT-R just that little bit too far. After our GT-R went 8.6 at 165 miles per hour, our focus switched over to Jet 200 to get it ready for the Yokohama World Time Attack Challenge. Now, to be honest, it didn't worry me that the GT-R got to sit and have a rest for a little while because it achieved way more than we ever thought it would. But when we got the call for the Turbosmart Flying 500, we got the car out and got it ready again. Now, keen observers would have noticed when we ran the 8.6, the car had a misfire in 5th gear. Now, the car had fresh plugs and fresh coil packs at the time, so we were pretty sure it wasn't that. So as part of our service routine to get it ready for the World Time Attack Challenge and the Turbosmart Flying 500, we did add some dielectric grease to it. We also added another earth to the coil pack system and gave the car a good check over and then took it out to go racing again. The Turbosmart Flying 500 is one of the on-track entertainment attractions of the Yokohama World Time Attack Challenge, and it sees some pretty crazy cars attend. This year, the format changed from solo runs measuring top speed to a roll racing elimination format. Friday saw us all go out for some grudge runs for practice. Well, what a world we live in that your 165 mile an hour GT-R is probably the slowest car at the event. And looking around at the competition at the Turbosmart Flying 500, it probably was. But we didn't care, we went there to have some fun, and that we did with some runs against Johnny Habib. You could call it a rematch for our Hoonigan this versus that battle. Now, Johnny had never done roll racing before and didn't have a speedo on his car, so a couple of runs were pretty interesting, but we had a whole bunch of fun on the ones that were done properly. Now, one thing we did notice is that the car did have the misfire in 5th on the first run. However, the more runs we did back to back, the worse it got until it reached the point where it started to misfire in 4th and then even in 3rd gear, and I actually bailed out of the final run. So a look over the logs in the Howtech revealed that there was no lean or rich condition causing the misfire. There was no loss in fuel pressure, so it wasn't fuel related. There was also, on the mis counter, there wasn't anything showing that there was any reason that the trigger kit wasn't working correctly at all either. We looked at the plugs, we looked at the coil packs, and from what we could tell, there was no reason for ignition or fuel to cause the misfire, which is obviously what you usually look for. So our last suspicion was that it was potentially lifting the head. The next morning I came in, opened up the header tank, and it actually required over a litre of water to top the cooling system back up, yet there was no coolant leaking under the car anywhere. So pretty much confirmed our suspicion that the head was lifting on the car. But I topped it up and decided to go back out in Saturday's competition, and I thought I would just slowly step up the power to see at what point there is an issue. So in my practice run, I kept it on a very sort of medium boost of about 900, and there wasn't a misfire. And then I had a buy run and I did the same, but a full pass. And then in my first round in the semi-finals, I had to go up against Anthony Matuk in R87. So I knew I had less than zero chance, because when a mid-8 second car races a low 7 second car and there's 20 mile an hour difference between them, you already know what's going to happen. But I set the boost at under 30 psi so that it made 1,000 horsepower, so if I could see if it was lifting the head and misfiring on that power setting. So there was no misfire on the 1,000 horsepower setting, but I'd now made it to the battle for third place against Robert Margin driving double barrel. The smart thing to do would have been to leave it on that 1,000 and see if it does it again, but sometimes car people, well, we're a little bit stupid. So I put it back to full power and expected to see the misfire return, and honestly, I just wanted to check that for the logs and see what happens. So, send it. So as predicted, the misfire was back when we turned it back up to 1,200 horsepower. Now, talking to Con, both after the event and a conversation we had a few months ago, this is pretty much expected, and you're probably wondering why. Well, when we dynoed the car on 1,100 horsepower, it only made 1,100 in fourth and fifth gear. The lower gears didn't have it. And also, back pressure was only slightly over 1-to-1 above 8,500 RPM. So we knew the car was well within its efficiency zone. And if you know anything about cylinder pressure isn't just how much boost or how much power you make. Back pressure is a big part of cylinder pressure as well. So as you start to squeeze a turbo right towards the end and past its efficiency range, kind of think of cylinder pressure as boost pressure plus back pressure, if you want to kind of have a way to think about that. So that's not what it is, but that's a way to think about it. So if you have really low back pressure and a lot of boost pressure, it's really efficient, you don't get really high cylinder pressure. But we started to push this turbo past 1,100 horsepower to run the 8.6 at 165. We upped the back pressure, obviously, but we didn't just up the back pressure in fourth and fifth gear. We turned the power up on this thing in every gear. And to be honest, we just pushed it that little bit too far. So what's the remedy to this? Well, obviously now we don't want the lifting of the head to get worse. We obviously need to pull the engine out, take the head off, and work out how we're going to remedy that problem. But the big thing we're going to have to do is put a larger rear housing on this turbo to eliminate back pressure so that we can make 1,200 reliably rather than make 1,100 reliably and 1,200 just being that little bit too far. We will discuss what our plan is after we've pulled the engine out, given it a health check and a look over, because the big news that we have in regards to this and why we're so keen to get it out, get it fixed and make some changes is we're going to send the car to America in 2024. Why? Well, we potentially want to try and make it to TX2K, a bunch of other events, and then have the car at GT-R Festival USA, which we're hopefully announcing the date very, very soon. So in our next episode of Motive Garage with our GT-R, we're going to give the engine a health check, pull it out, take the head off, inspect what happened, so you guys can learn just how far you can push one of these engines with a normal MLS head gasket before you need to start worrying about cylinder pressure. So stay tuned.